morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming in this morning. Just a couple brief announcements. We're at school for the full day today. No early dismissal or anything like that. And yesterday's early dismissal, some of you might have thought it was very early. It's got to do with the train schedules and making sure we dismiss it on that the guys who are on the sort of main trains the guys take and get to train and then be off the train before the snow comes down really hard. We were at 5:30 yesterday morning. We were trying to look up all the train schedules and sort of do our best to accommodate that. So it did seem at 11:15 like why are we getting out now? It was kind of tired around here, but that's why that happened. For 8th grade parents, our next parent coffee is Friday, March 1st, and that's for the 8th grade parents. Mr. Drain, the academic vice principal, will be here, and he will talk about the high school academic program. So just, all that, and I'm looking forward for 8th grade parents in late March. We will talk to the 8th graders about the course selection process. So all that will happen as well. In early April, or late March, early April, they'll bring a course selection form back to you. But they will, again, Mr. Drain will be here, talk about the high school academic program, talk about some of the choices the boys will make going into freshman year, talk about some of the sort of things further down the road with that. In 7th grade, I know we have a parent coffee, I believe sometime in March, but I don't have the date on the top of my head. So today we're going to talk about this concept of a growth mindset. I remember back fall of 2007, it was right before our first progress reports went out in the first year of Arrupe. I read the article, The Perils and Promises of Praise by Carol Dweck, who is the woman who's done such work, all the work really on the growth mindset. And she discussed at the time, it was the first time I read about it, discussed at the time studies that show how different types of praise can affect how students learn and their intelligence. And so this was the first time I heard about the growth mindset. So today I'll come back in a second. In January, we've been talking about it for the last 12 years in different ways, and a lot of things we've done in Arrupe over that time. Some of the changes we've made have been, as we've become more thoughtful about the growth mindset, some of the changes we've made to sort of promote that and foster it within the students. On January 2nd, when we had a faculty day, the boys came back on the 3rd, we had a faculty day on January 2nd. We had an educator, Kim Marshall, came in and presented to the faculty pretty much the entire morning on a lot of different things involving assessment. But one of the things he did was show this video on the growth mindset. So this is Carol Dweck speaking. Now, according to Kim Marshall, he said, Carol Dweck is not the most exciting presenter. So they created this video where you have the artistic illustrations around. It's her voice in the background. I'm just sharing that. That's what I was told. I don't know. But it's her voice in the background. It's her ideas and the illustrator that goes along with it. When he showed that, and we had some discussion in the theater at the time after the video, I thought this would be a good one to show to parents. I think it's a very good synopsis of her ideas. So I'll show it, and then we'll talk a little more after that. It's about 8 minutes or something like that. 10 minutes.
In my work, we find that some students have a fixed mindset about their intellectual abilities and talents. They think intelligence is just a fixed trait. You have a certain amount, and that's that. This is the mindset that makes kids afraid to try because they're afraid to look dumb. But other students have a growth mindset. They believe that intelligence can be developed through their effort, dedication, learning, and mentorship from others. They don't think everyone's the same or that anyone can be Einstein, but they understand that even Einstein wasn't the guy he became before he put in years and years of dedicated labor. I'm going to organize this by telling you about a study we did with hundreds of students making the transition to 7th grade. They're about 13 years old. It's an extremely difficult transition. The work gets substantially harder, the grading gets more stringent, the environment becomes less personal. And that's a crucial time. It's a time when many students turn off to school. So as they entered, we measured their mindsets. That is, we saw whether they believed intelligence was fixed or could be developed. We monitored their grades in math over the next 2 years. We also measured a lot about their attitudes toward learning. They had entered 7th grade with just about identical achievement test scores, but by the end of the first term, their grades jumped apart and continued to diverge over the next 2 years. The only thing that differed were their mindsets. Now, let's see why and how this happened. The first thing we found was that they had completely different goals in school. The number one goal for kids in a fixed mindset is look smart at all times and at all costs. So their whole lives are oriented toward avoiding tasks that might show a deficiency. But in a growth mindset, where they believe intelligence can be developed, their cardinal role is learn at all times and at all costs. That brings us to the second mindset rule. In a fixed mindset, effort is a bad thing. They believe if you have ability, you shouldn't need effort. And if you need a lot of effort, it's a sign that you don't have ability. I believe that belief, that if you have ability, you shouldn't need effort, is one of the worst beliefs that anyone can have. I think it's why so many of our promising students don't fulfill their potential. They go along, coasting along, not trying that hard. The other kids have to try. One day they have to try too, and they can't do it. Whereas students in a growth mindset say effort is what activates their ability. And rule number 3, in a fixed mindset, a setback or deficiency measures you and reveals your limitations. So what we find is that those students in a fixed mindset try to hide their mistakes or run from their mistakes, conceal their deficiencies. But those in a growth mindset think mistakes, setbacks, natural part of learning. It's what happens when you take on challenges. So a fixed mindset gives no way for students to handle difficulty. They may get discouraged, give up, leave, or become defensive, acting bored. Often this statement, it's boring, is a cover for a fixed mindset. It means I'm afraid to try, or acting out, blaming the teacher or material. How are these mindsets transmitted? We've studied this in a number of ways, but maybe the most interesting way is through praise. For 15 years, we have studied how adults' praise affects students. We undertook this work at the height of the self-esteem movement, when the gurus were telling us all to praise our children's ability, tell them how brilliant and talented they are. But for 15 years, we have found praising children's intelligence harms them. It puts them into a fixed mindset and turns them off to challenging learning. Let me tell you about a series of studies we did with 10 and 11-year-olds. We brought them to a room in their school. We gave them 10 problems from this nonverbal IQ test initially. They did pretty well because they were matched to their age level, and each child received one form of praise. A third of them got intelligence praise. Wow, that's a really good score. You must be smart at this. Or process praise. That's about the process they engaged in. It could be their strategy, their effort, their focus, their persistence. Wow, that's a really good score. You must have tried really hard. And the control group. Wow, that's a really good score. I won't talk much about them because they tended to be in the middle. Now, if you listen carefully to the messages that are embodied in each statement, the first one says, I value intelligence. The second says, I value process. Let's see what happened. First, yes indeed, praising intelligence put kids into a fixed mindset compared to praising the process. But the most astonishing thing to us was that praising intelligence turned kids off to learning. Because after we praised them, we said, what do you want to do now? Anything's fine with us. You want a hard task you can learn from, but you might make mistakes? Or do you want a task that's like something you're already good at? The majority of kids who were praised for their intelligence rejected the chance to learn in favor of something they were sure to do well on. But those praised for the process overwhelmingly wanted the hard task they could learn from. They didn't feel they were in jeopardy if they struggled for a while. Later, we gave everyone a difficult set of problems. And here we found that those who were praised for intelligence lost their confidence, didn't enjoy the problems anymore. And even when we went back to the easier problems, their performance suffered. Those who were praised for the process remained confident. They saw these problems were harder. Many of them said the hard ones were their favorites. And when we went back to the easier ones, their performance flourished because they remained engaged and they remained learning. A few months ago, we published a study showing that mothers praised to their babies 1 to 3 years of age predicted that child's mindset and desire for challenge 5 years later. So now I feel justified when I intervene with mothers at airports who are telling their babies that they're geniuses. I have the data. So remember, praise process. But it's even more than that. It's conveyed to children a new value system. Not about quick, easy, smart things, but like this. Sit around the dinner table and say, who had a fabulous struggle today? And each person shares the struggle. Or if a child does something quickly and easily, instead of rushing to tell them how good they are at it, we should say, oh, I'm sorry I wasted your time. Let's do something hard. Let's do something you can learn from. Recently, I have fallen in love with a new word, yet. I heard of a high school in Chicago where when they didn't master a unit, instead of a failing grade, they got the grade not yet. And I thought, isn't that great? Because not yet means, hey, you're on that learning curve, you're somewhere. And so if a child says, I'm not good at maths yet, it's like, get back on that learning curve. I can't do it yet. I tried, but it didn't work yet. The more research shows us that human abilities are capable of growth, the more it becomes a basic human right for students to experience that growth, to live in environments in which all students can fulfill their potential.
I'm pretty sure I grew up in a sort of culture that promoted a fixed mindset more than anything else. When I was in school, we were told we were smart or we were not smart. We were told we were good at math and we were not good at math. And there was a lot of sorting back in school, certainly in the 70s and 80s when I was in school. And I'm sure there were things that promoted a growth mindset as well. I don't think anybody is all of one way or all of another. We've been talking about growth mindset for the past 12 years in the Arrupe division. Sometimes we do it well, sometimes we don't. That's still, we're keeping that growth mindset that we can keep getting better at this. I catch myself sometimes saying the thing I know I'm not supposed to say. And I think sometimes even more complicated when we talk about building students' confidence. Being careful not, we build in their confidence in, the process. If they keep working at it, if they go for extra help, if they take feedback and apply it, they'll get better. Or we build in their confidence in, I'm good at this. And because again, sometimes that can be shaken when all of a sudden something's hard for the first time. I worry the most about some of the students who school's always been easy. And what's going to happen? I hope it gets hard at some point in time in 7th and 8th grade. I'd like to see that, if they have, again, because it's always easy, it's pretty easy to have that fixed mindset. People always be telling you, you're a wonderful student, you're so smart, you're so this. It's good if that confidence is shaken in 7th and 8th grade. And sometimes it's really hard when it gets shaken and they don't know what to do about it. But I'd rather them go through that process now and go through that. And for some, it's not till, senior year in high school or senior year in college or med school or somewhere along the way that it really becomes hard for the first time. And again, we don't really know exactly what their mindset is until it becomes hard. For other guys, it might be in sports. They've always been told they're such a superstar, and eventually the other kids get their growth spurts too, and sometimes catch up, or they get into that bigger pool, and the confidence can just be shattered. So, kind of work on that. So we are fact, again, we saw that video back in January. We've been talking about sort of re-up the conversation. So at a faculty meeting a week ago, I had in departments the teachers just talking about what do they do to foster growth mindset. What are some of the things we had a bunch of categories. I shared some on this not very attractive looking handout I put together. But just some of the things, some of the practices that the teachers listed. One is that expectation that students will attend extra help sessions. We talk about that a lot. I find a lot of students come in, some of them come in and they are, yes, of course I need to go to extra help when things are struggling, because they've done that before. And others, it's that it's convincing them going to extra help does not mean you're a student. Going to extra help means you're trying to learn. And there are some guys that are very fearful of going to extra help for the first time. They never need to go, and so if they go for extra help, that must mean there's a problem with them. And trying to convince them, and again, setting that expectation that everyone will go for extra help at some point in time is something we try to do. Presenting new topics and asking students to try them, not expecting mastery the first time. And again, getting kids used to that. The learning is not about, I know everything already. It's about learning those things. Retakes, revisions, redos. That's why we have them. That's why, to kind of convince kids, hey, if the first time you did it, maybe you got 80% of it. Maybe you got most of it, or you some of it. Or maybe you're a disaster. But that's why you come back and you look at that feedback, and when you don't understand the feedback, because the teacher seems to be speaking a different language than you are, you go for extra help and get that feedback explained. You ask questions, and you try to apply that feedback. Exit slips. A lot of this is just at the end of class. A lot of teachers will use exit slips to find out, hey, what did they do? It's a quick question, sort of a summary question to figure out how many of them actually learned what I think they were learning today, and then being able to go back over that. Self-assessment. A lot of self-assessment. A lot of things that Tracy and Jen do in organizing our advisory groups. There's a lot of reflection, a lot of how did you do? We go over progress reports, we go over report cards. And trying to get them to think about what did you do? What are you most proud of is a question I ask them a lot. And I say to them, it might not be the best grade on it. That's the grade that you worked the most. Another question I asked the advisory group I was working with, when the report cards came out, I said, what's the class that made you think the most? Or what's the class where you had to work the most? Things like that, just trying to get them to sort of reflect on it, assess themselves. Or for some of the guys, I would also ask, hey, what, if you did better over the second half of the semester, what is it you did differently? And again, trying to encourage a lot of times, what are you doing differently? Because a lot of times they just do the same thing over and over again. Promoting effort on homework, someone wrote this down. Just sort of, rather than looking at a percent correct, just sort of making sure they're putting effort in. A lot of times in math, they're not grading homework, they're just seeing that they put the effort in to try to do it, to try to figure it out. And there is some assessment there based on, okay, you just got a bunch of numbers on the page, you put any effort into this to try to figure it out. Standards-based grading, I know that's very confusing. But it is, the whole point of standards-based grading, the whole point of pushing to mastery is that idea of a growth mindset. You keep going at it. And a lot of things like even writing is a thing that should be standards-based grading because you're always getting better at writing, taking that feedback and working toward it. One of the teachers, or the English teachers put down group work, fostering dialogue, encouraging students to build on each other's strengths. When they talk to each other and they hear each other with what the other person's doing and the other person's ideas, and sometimes in a group, they start to realize, hey, my strength is to do the drawing, and my strength is to do the more of the speaking in the presentation. And guys start to realize some of the strengths and what they can get better at and how that works. Options or choice. A lot of times teachers will give them a range of ways to show that they know something. And so guys can keep working at it. One of the biggest things is one-on-one conferences, and you'll see in our team classes particularly, because of that setup with 3 teachers in there and with flexibility, a lot of times they are working on projects in class so that they can do sort of one-on-one conferencing with the teacher and the teacher can say, okay, what are you doing? How's that working? What do you need to do next? Working with that. So I asked them also to teach, say, what are some of the language that fosters a growth mindset? So things like explain, did you consider, or this is blank, this is 60% complete, or 80% complete, which means we're going to keep going. Why? Again, retake, revise, redo. Not yet, which is she has in the video, she talks about that. A lot of times when they're trying to explain the the standard-based grading, because sort of progressing toward mastery, and mastery is that telling students that progressing is where you probably be that first time through or the second time through. That you're making progress and trying to foster that idea. Working towards the standard, almost, close. There are many ways to communicate the same idea. It's the process that leads to improvement and growth. This is hard, but you can get it. Maybe not yet, but you will. And a lot of times, and that's good for them to know, hey, it's hard. Hard is good. Again, encouraging. I would love it if all of your sons really struggle at some point in time. Not all of them do. Some of them fly through for whatever reason, but we try to encourage that struggle. What I want to do is have Tracy and Jen come up. Tracy Donuts is our 7th grade guidance counselor this year. Jen Hornby is our 8th grade guidance counselor. They do a lot of work with this, with groups and individuals, so I'll let them talk a little about what kind of things they do.
Good morning. Jen and I are going to bounce back and forth a little bit. And I'm going to start by talking about kind of one-on-one help that we give and how we try to develop this growth mindset. And I love that Bob has this up because it always as easy as them coming in and saying, this feedback is constructive. Unfortunately, we get a lot of them coming in and saying, like, this feedback is a personal attack by my teacher, or it's not right, and they're upset. So it's helping them over the next 2 years develop the ability to see things like that as constructive, as places to grow. I think when we get our boys in 7th grade, in 8th grade, a lot of what we get are students who have always been smart, and that's sort of their mindset of who they are. And so helping them deal with those failures, those bumps along the way of being pushed, it can be anything as little as like forgetting a belt, right? They've always been perfect, they've always had what they needed, and they don't have their belt and they might get jumped. And that's a moment that even talks to them like, hey, you're okay, we can fix this. Look, it's not that big of a deal, and even helping them work through that. Just something came to my mind because I had a kid this morning without a belt, very panicked. He's now wearing a very nice one with sailor flags on it. I don't know, that's what I have in my office. So I was going to start by talking about one-on-one meetings. What Jen and I like to do, we meet with a lot of kids one-on-one throughout their 2 years here when we have them. It could be once they're panicked about something, it could be weekly, it could be every day for a while. One of my favorite things is seeing them later, and when they say, they might be a senior, they go, do you remember when I used to come in here all the time? And I'm like, I do, and look, like you've grown, you've developed skills, whatever it was for, whether it was social or emotional or academic, friendship, whatever it is, you've worked through those skills. So we try to help them identify areas of strength especially when it's academics that they're struggling with. So what I think about like, we get a lot of students 7th, 8th grade who struggle with math. And what it might be is that on a math test, they're not doing well. They can do the homework, they do okay, they get 100% on their homework checks, and then with the test, it's not looking the same. They get very frustrated right away. So what we try to do is help reframe it for the boys to say, let's identify where things are going well in your homework, right? And let's use that on a test. Let's come up with one thing. We don't have to analyze all of it at once. Let's try one little thing that you do on your homework that you don't do when you take a test because maybe you have a different mindset, not this kind of mindset, but you're in a different place when you're taking your test. You have the pressure of it being a test or a quiz. And let's work on those, helping them find the strengths in one place and moving them somewhere else. And even that from subject to subject. So we'll get students who maybe are doing really well in Spanish and not well in team classes. And for them, it's very hard to see. They come in with this, I don't understand my team classes, it's not going well, or like this science project is so hard. And helping them develop a skill to do some self-reflection, to be able to say, okay, where are my strengths in Spanish that can actually correlate to science class? Is it note-taking? Is it my ability to study really well, to be really specific, to remember important things later, to recall that? Can I use that when I present for my science presentation, which they might not first see as correlating. So help them to find that their strengths go over all of their classes or that they can use them. I think that we do a lot of when they get really frustrated and they hit a wall academically in one-on-one meetings, reminding them of a time where they've had a success before. So even with our students who have struggled a lot, is saying, do you remember when you couldn't figure out that project and you revised it 4 times and then we met with Miss Green and you sat down and you fixed it? And helping them for a while see that about themselves, they'll be able to develop that skill eventually where they can see it. They can see where they've had those wins.
Besides one-on-one meetings, another thing we do frequently is sort of small group workshops dedicated to organization skills, time management strategies, some test-taking strategies, things like that. And in that process, what we're doing is we're trying to help them and guide them to try some new things, just to get out of that fixed mindset of, I've always been disorganized, I've always been a terrible test taker, and help them and again, kind of force them to try something new and then check back in with them and see how they've managed to showcase some improvement. And then really praising that improvement little bits along the way. So again, kind of in those small group workshops, we do quite a bit of the mindset challenging.
We wanted to make sure we also touched on not just academics, but we try to use this language and help the boys see that they can grow in other ways as well. So Jen and I, both in one-on-one meetings, but also in groups that we run a divorce group, we run a healing group for kids who have lost somebody, we run a social skills group. So helping them see that too as not a fixed idea of who they are. We right now have an introvert group that won't quit. They love it. They just want to keep coming to introvert group. It's so great. And because they have found this power in who they are and this ability to say that maybe yes, the lunchroom is overwhelming for you, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good time at lunch. That doesn't mean you can't make friends here. That doesn't mean you have to be the quiet kid, right? It just means this is how you get your energy, how you deal with those situations. So we try to kind of use this in all types of places. We also run stress and anxiety group, and that's another place where we really work with the boys to say, you're not fixed to say my anxiety will always be the dictator of how I act, how I react, what happens in my life. You actually can come up with these coping skills, and we can help you come up with ways that you can grow still, that this is not something that holds you back. So we try to use it not just academics, but also with all types of things.
In addition to academics, we do have some students that are struggling maybe more than the typical student. So what we have is some policies and procedures in place called academic support. And what that allows us to do is kind of scaffold them, put some extra check-ins that are mandated, do some extra progress reports for them. And again, throughout that process, Tracy and I are checking with them individually to help them sort of understand that any little improvement you can show in your academics is worth celebrating. And again, we're praising that process of them getting there, making changes in order to get there and show that improvement.
Yeah, the last thing I think, Bob mentioned this a little bit, but we try really hard with advisory. Jen and I write the curriculum that our advisors use is to use a language of growth. So, there's a lot of students that are still doing well. They're putting in the hard work and the effort, but even getting those students to reflect on where did you work the hardest and are you the most proud of at your report card? Maybe you have all A's, but still, it might not be the class you love the most or the class you have the best grade in, but having the advisors push them in that setting in front of their peers to say, where did you really work hard and why are you proud of that? Maybe it's something you had to revise 4 times, but what did you learn from that experience? And I think we take that in advisory, we use that language one-on-one. So when a student is really frustrated, to be able to say to them, I know you're frustrated, I know you tried really hard, and what can we do going forward? So we try to get that kind of infused into all the things that we do with the boys. Back to you.
Any questions for Tracy or Jen or?
I guess I wonder, how do you initiate those one-on-one meetings? So you expect your boys to come to you, or how do you identify what might be sufficient?
Combination of
Yes,
all
gonna
of
say,
the above.
yeah.
I mean, oftentimes we'll get referrals from parents. Can you check in on my son? He's going through a tough time, or struggling with math, or whatever it might be. Our doors are always open to, we often have candy and games, and so they sort of find their way in there and then feel comfortable to approach us on their own as needed too.
I would say teachers too, like teachers might say, hey, this guy's really struggling on this project, this class, this is going on. And we do both ways, and sometimes we'll just grab them and say, hey, do you have a second? I heard, math's gotten really hard. And for a lot of them, that's like a relief. They didn't want to come down, like, it has gotten really hard, and they want to talk about it. Sometimes we also go up to the classroom, so like I'll just pop in, and say, hey, let me just walk around to each group. I know who I actually want to talk to because they've been identified by somebody, but you can kind of like check in with everyone, so then they don't feel this like beacon of, a spotlight on
I
them.
think we're very cognizant of their age and not embarrassing anyone and, pointing them out or making them look any different than anyone else.
If somebody is fixed mindset, is that sort of, how easy is it to change at all to growth mindset?
I think it works really well to give them, it's harder than it sounds, to give them kind of like small experiments. So I can think of like some students, they're very fixed in a class, I don't get it, I don't like it, and they have a reason, like, I don't want that teacher. I want to switch teachers for this class, like that's going to fix it. So it's trying to get them to like do, I don't know, for me at least, like small experiments, like, well, we can't change your teacher. So let's try this one little thing. Like, let's try one thing and see if it gets better. Let's try another thing and see if it gets better. Like, kind of building on it. Because you also can't say to them, be open to growth, you'll be fine. They need a little bit more help.
It's definitely a process, and depending on the individual, I think it varies.
Yeah.
But certainly we're fortunate at this age group to, again, if they struggle, if we identify this early and start kind of working on altering their mindset, it can be more easy than your mindset.
One of the things I've heard is, you'll have some guys that have fixed mindset in some areas. So it may be I'm not good at math or whatever. But, out on the soccer field, they've always, they've had a tremendous growth mindset. They'll do the drills, they'll do whatever. So it's sometimes helping them to sort of transfer, hey, why are you getting better at soccer? Why do you keep making these teams? Everyone said that you had a tough time making that team, but you did. Why? What did you do? And then sort of getting them to see that hey, hard work works in this area, maybe it can in that area. If I'm a fixed mindset kid and I start to do poorly in class, first thing I'm going to do is hide. Because I'm hoping nobody notices. Because again, you watch the video, I want to make sure that my goal in school is to look smart. And now I'm not looking smart, so I'm going to hide that as best as possible. And now parents have this open grade book, which makes it a little more difficult for me to hide. And the second thing I'm probably going to do is blame. It's somebody else's fault for this. We all do this, so it's typical. I had a great a student, an 8th grader. He's in geometry, so he's always done well in school. Complete meltdown last week, a week and a half ago. And so talking to him, everything he was saying was, and we were talking about this, in fact, so it resonated, everything was fixed mindset. Eventually, I work 2 hours a night on this. How can you possibly be working 2 hours a night on this? But we talked it through, and he actually, his father came in with him, and they met with the teacher. I saw them after the meeting, and I said, so what do you need to do? I said, do you need to do more or do differently? He said, different. And I said, all right, so do you have a plan? Yes. And I saw him yesterday, because I know they take a test every Friday, so he gets it back on Monday. I said, how'd you do? and I got 95% off. So I said, why? He said, because I studied differently. So, so sometimes you can, sometimes they have that victory quickly. Other times it takes a long time for that victory to come, and so it does take longer to make those changes. But that's why you just keep working at it. We don't have to fix anyone in a week. We're trying to just over time. It'll take me decades to move from my fixed mindset to my growth mindset, to a growth mindset, but I'm working on it. I tell parents usually being in 7th grade, 2 habits we want students to have by the time they finish 8th grade. One is doing their homework to the best of ability on a consistent basis. And the second is, when they struggle, go for extra help. And again, just like in Arrupe, there's a phenomenal culture of extra help in the high school. Teachers are available. It's just a little bit trickier because teachers over there have offices, and sometimes the offices are in a different building. And so they have to find the offices, whereas in Arrupe, you kind of can't avoid a teacher because they're there. And the teachers are usually, they don't really have offices, so they're in whatever their room is. But it is that same, it's a little different. High schools tend to be a little different. Middle schools are built more for this kind of thing. High schools are a little different. But again, it is that idea of, hey, you should be coming for extra help. You should be taking feedback that we're giving you. You should be asking questions. If you struggle, you will, the number one thing you should do is go to your teacher. I think again, I mentioned earlier, Charlie Jane will be here on March 1st to talk to the teachers, talk to the parents about the academic program in the high school. That's probably one of the messages he's going to give. One of the things that he's going to say is that culture of going for extra help. So that's a big part of it. The grading does not do it in the same way, although a lot of the teachers, my son's now a junior, so I know that none of the teachers do some things with some revisions or some retakes. So it depends. It's a little, some will be more one way or more the other, but it will continue.
That was a shift, being able to do retakes and everything, and he likes that a lot. And it was just like, when we go to high school, and if it's just like one chance kind of thing.
Yeah, there's 2 things about retakes, because I do think it's a little confusing. One is, what we hope the students learn is, the better you put in the first time, the less work it is to make it really good. But the other thing is, when you don't do retakes, your bar is a little lower. You can when you're thinking that kids will take 2 or 3 times to hit that bar, you can make it very high because you're expecting, Whereas if you're only doing a one-shot thing, that bar is going to be lower to start with. So that's that. So there is a difference. So in classes where teachers are pushing that, it tends to be writing has a lot to do. A lot of times it's just that idea of, hey, we're doing a rough draft. And you remember from high school, doing essays and stuff. And teachers say, hey, bring a rough draft to me ahead of time. We're hoping that this idea of the retakes and revisions, they get into the habit of, oh, a rough draft is a good thing, rather than I'll just write my final paper, in the last 20 minutes before class starts, hand that in, and everything will be fine. So we're hoping that they get into this habit of, I need to do something, get some feedback so that I can come out with more success.
I was just in a 7th grade classroom last week where they're doing this guitar project, and we had these 2 kids who we just kept having to redo the measurements for their thing. But you have one who's very used to just clear-cut grades, doing well, getting really frustrated, and one guy who's really good at this, let's just try again, we didn't get it, let's try it again. And so not only am I there trying to help them, but the teacher's there too, saying, we're saying to the one who's very fixed, I know you're frustrated, but look at your partner's mindset. We have to figure it out. You guys have to work together to figure it out. So it's sort of trying to custom model to everybody. This is the mindset that we want, is that maybe you didn't figure out this time, but you can erase it and you can try again and you'll get there. So I do think there's some anecdotal grading, if you will, on the process within projects, classes, and things that happen.
Thank you all for coming in. We will be here for a while if anyone wants to come up and chat with us. Again, thanks for coming in this morning.